welcome back to Andy's Vinyl. It's been a very long time since I've done one of these videos. What I wanted to do today is another ranking video, one of my favourite artists' albums. I've been meaning to do this one for quite some time. It's going to be a little bit different to the other two that I've done. This one is singer-songwriter Kate Bush, and being as how Kate's running up that hill, has just made it into the UK #1 after re-entering the charts after 30 odd or 40 odd years. I thought this would be a good time to get it done. So what I'm intending to do is go through Kate's original studio albums and rank them from 10 up to #1, just give you my thoughts on the albums in general. I'm not going to overanalyze all of Kate's songs and try to review each song. That would take me forever trying to figure out what Kate's writing is about. I think it's all personal taste and individual interpretations of Kate's songs anyway. So I'm just going to do an overall of the albums and some thoughts on them and Kate's career in general. So I'm not going to include the 1986 compilation, The Whole Story, although it's a good compilation of Kate's early work and probably her most famous work. That's out of scope. Also out of scope is Before the Dawn, Kate's live work from I think 2013 from memory, something like that. I was lucky enough to go and see that in London, thankfully. And I'm not going to include The Other Sides, another compilation, again a very good one, collecting all of Kate's 12-inch cuts, B-sides and 1 or 2 live tracks. If you haven't got that and you like Kate and you've got some of her studio work, I would recommend picking that up. Some very good stuff on there. Right, so let's get going. So at number 10 is 2011's 2 LP set Director's Cut. So what have I got to say about this? Well, it's Kate revisiting some of her previous work and reimagining several tracks that she wasn't entirely happy with in retrospect. There's 11 tracks in total on this double LP. 7 of them come from The Red Shoes, so she actually reworks the majority of that album, and the other 4 come from the Sensual World, which is the previous album to The Red Shoes. And again, Kate picks up on some tracks that she's not perhaps entirely happy with. Kate's a perfectionist, so it's no surprise that she revisits her work and tries to bring it up to date. That's just the way she is. The 4 tracks from the Sensual World on here are all longer than the original LP cuts, particularly This Woman's Work, which clocks in at 6 minutes 29. It's a very different piece from the original song that we're mainly familiar with. I do regard This Woman's Work as one of Kate's top 4 classic songs. So unusual that Kate felt the need to revisit that one, but you know, it's personal taste. The Sensual World track itself, the title track, that's been changed to Flower of the Mountain, so it's not too dissimilar from the original, but Kate's given it a new title. It's on the lyrics on the song. Yeah, so Kate sees herself in a different place now to when she made the original albums, and she obviously felt the need to do this. Perhaps she got the inspiration to do it after she did Ariel, so maybe that's the case, but I don't consider it a bona fide studio album. It's not fresh material, so in principle I have to have it at number 10 anyway. Right, number 9, 2011's 50 Words of Snow. Yeah, so this is the second LP from 2011, 2 LPs in 1 year. We haven't seen that since 1978 for Kate. This did get to number 5, and by the way, the director's got to number 2, so they were selling, obviously, but this is a more modern market, so perhaps it wouldn't have done quite so well back in the 70s or the 80s. It's the follow-up to Ariel. Even though there was 6 years between the 2 LPs, it was Kate's next original release, and it's a little bit like Ariel. There's just 7 tracks on here, and they're all quite long. Misty, for example, is 13 minutes long. It's a slower pace than the earlier work that we had, and on the back of Ariel, this kind of confirms that the style of writing that Kate now prefers. Long Gone is the 3-minute sort of pop song that Kate started out with, although there were unusual songs that they kind of blended in at the time. Now we get a much more considered, reflective piece of work from Kate. Longer, slower, more reflective, and Kate's more mature approach to how she writes music and presents it, and how she likes to express herself. It's not, you know, a big one for me. I've played it a few times, obviously, and it's okay to put on in the background and listen to. But if I'm going to play this or Ariel, I'll probably do prefer Ariel over the two here. So that's my number 9. 8, The Red Shoes. This was Kate's last LP in her original run of albums from 1993. Got to number 2 in the charts before she retired from public life. Kate wasn't entirely happy with this album when she was making it. She had a lot of personal disruptions in her life. Her mother died during the production of this LP. She split up from her long-time partner Del Palmer, who was a sounding engineer and had been working with Kate all through her career. So it was a very difficult period for Kate. This album kind of reflects that in a way. It's a little bit of a patchwork. There's some nice stuff on here, particularly like Moments of Pleasure. That's a really good standout track on here. But I'm not a big fan of Rubber Band Girl or Eat the Music, which are 2 upbeat tracks on the album. I did a bit of research online for this, and I found some commentary that suggested that when Kate did this album, she tried to make it more of a live feel. She tried to produce it so that she'd maybe take the album on the road and do some live concerts. Considering what happened in Kate's personal life and the overall lackluster reception to this LP, it wasn't deemed satisfactory by the press and her fans, to be honest. Kate obviously decided not to do any live thing, and we never heard anything more about that. So just interesting there. So yeah, I've got it at number 8 in my list. Don't think there's anything else I can say about that one. Number 7, 2005's double LP, Ariel, got to number 3. If nothing else, Kate's albums do sell well. This was the first album that Kate came out with since she returned to work after a long absence. So it's 2 sides of original material, so she must have had quite a lot of music in her that she'd been storing up to get out. A bit like 50 Words of Snow, they're kind of long, laid-back pieces, again reflecting how Kate sees music now and how she sees herself. If you actually listen to some of the tracks, it's almost a wallpaper for Kate's life, home life, I think. She sings about washing machines, and there's a song on here called Bertie, which is the name of her son. Yeah, so I think Kate spending a lot of time being a domestic person rather than a person in the spotlight, and she's singing about everyday stuff, and it works actually. I would much rather listen to this than 50 Words of Snow or Director's Cut. You can play this in the car, just relaxing as you're driving. You can play it in the bathroom if you're having a soak in the bath. It's a good one to have on in the background. Yeah, so I'm relatively pleased with it. I'm not putting it any higher than number 7 because obviously there's some really good stuff to come, as you'll know. But it's a very chilling record, so I think it's good for that reason. I think it's better than The Red Shoes. Hard to find on the EMI label. This is Kate's last contractual album from EMI. Those of us will know, if you didn't buy it on vinyl in the first place, because at that point vinyl hadn't taken back off, it was still very much digital era, so most of us probably bought the CD. I didn't buy the vinyl when it came out, and I had to wait ages until the prices started to come down following the Fish People reissues 3 or 4 years ago. So eventually I found a vinyl copy. So there we go, Ariel. So number 6, 1989's Sensual World. Again, got to number 2, high charter. Last album produced by Kate in the 1980s. follow up to Hounds of Love, although there's a slight shift in tone on the music here. Kate's gone on record as saying that up until the Hounds of Love, she sang and wrote in a very sort of male orientated way to please the male ear. I don't know whether that was deliberate or just subconsciously I guess. But Kate decided for this album she wanted to give it a lighter tone and make it a bit more feminine. So she employed a trio of folk singers called Trio Bulgara on a few of the tracks here. And I think it does work. The album does work. It does what it intends to do, I think. It is a lighter in tone, but it's still good despite that. Yes, there's no diminishing in quality here. I particularly like the Fog album track on here. That's very good. Sensual World as the title track is okay. And This Woman's Work is on this album. It was originally written for the film The Castaway, I think it was, or no, not The Castaway. She Having a Baby, I think. I might be wrong, but if anybody can confirm that in the comments, please do. And that was put on this album as its sort of home LP. Again, I've said before, that's a classic track. Brilliant. I think Kate's top 4 tracks of all time are going to be This Woman's Work, Running Up That Hill, Babushka, and Warrior in the Heights. This is also the last LP to feature Kate on the cover. Okay, number 5, Kate's debut LP from 1978, got to number 3, released in February 78. This album was the result of a lot of early recording sessions with Kate and Del Palmer helping her, and also Dave Gilmour from Pink Floyd, who had helped kickstart Kate's career and get her introduced her to him and get her on the ladder. Kate wrote a lot of songs in her teens, and despite that, it's quite a very good quality album. I mean, Wuthering Heights is a classic, obviously. First single released by Kate, early 78, spent 4 weeks at number 1. Interestingly, EMI didn't rate the song. They wanted James and the Cold Gun, an album track on here, to be the single because it had a rockier feel. They probably felt that Kate was going to be a sort of female rock solo artist in the same way that perhaps Pat Benatar or Suzi Quatro were. They were thinking in those terms. Kate obviously had a much better idea of the direction she wanted her career to go in. She insisted on Wuthering Heights, absolutely insisted on put her foot down, as she insisted on the cover being this one and not the pink leotard cover that you've probably seen in publicity photographs. So right from the start, Kate was making her views known and what she wanted to do. Other tracks on here, Moving, great introductory track, features some whale song on there. The Man with His Child in His Eyes, lovely ballad. Interestingly, if you've not heard the original vinyl single of that song, it's very slightly different to the LP cut, and I would recommend hunting it out. Maybe you find it on YouTube probably. The introduction to the song features a small girl's laughing, it was Kate laughing, in a very childlike manner, which is not on the LP cut, and that's the only real difference. But it's just interesting to hear it, so I'd recommend seeking that out. Another good one on here is Them Heavy People, very good track. Some of these songs were actually recorded as early as 1975. I think 2 of them, The Man with the Child in His Eyes and Saxophone Song, were recorded when Kate was just 17. And that's interesting. We'll touch on that later on in a video when I talk about Kate's songwriting. So the kick inside, number 5. Some people might have it higher, I can understand that, but then there's some real quality stuff here, so something's got to sit at number 5, I'm afraid. Number 4, Lionheart, the follow-up LP to the kick inside, released the same year in November of 78 and got to number 6. For some people not quite as strong as the kick inside, but for me I really like the songs on here. Again, it's very much in the same style as the kick inside, very woodwind based. Again, it's a collection of Kate's early songs that were deemed good enough by the producers to put on these first 2 LPs. Kate had written a whole bunch of songs in the early mid-70s. You know, she used to sort of do it secretly in a shed or the barn of a family's home and write stuff down and write lyrics and just keep it and practice on the piano. So she had a whole raft of songs to choose from. So with her and the producer, they selected the best ones for these first two albums. So this second album, Kate probably feels it doesn't have quite the stronger material on it, because that would be used on the first album. But I think the stuff on here is just as good, if not slightly better. Kate's also quite embarrassed about this LP, considering where she is now with her songwriting. She will see these songs as the product of a young childish girl fantasizing and writing a bit of nonsense. I can understand that point of view from somebody who's actually done it, but from a fan perspective, listening to the LP, I don't find anything wrong with it. I think it's fantastic. I think it's a lovely album. I really like the tracks on here. Wow is a good track on here. Don't Push Your Foot on the Heartbreak is excellent. Symphony in Blue is excellent. And I really like England, My Lionheart, which for some fans is a sort of alternative English national anthem. Yeah, so I love this. I also love the cover. A bit kittish. Kate probably doesn't approve now, but yeah, I really think the cover's fantastic. So yeah, they're very close to the kicking side, but putting one in front of the other, I just put this ahead of it. Okay, getting to the top three. Getting difficult now. So I could put any one of these three in the reverse order and it wouldn't make a whole lot of difference. But my number three is going to be The Hounds of Love from 1985, a number one album. This is Kate's not exactly comeback LP, but she'd been away for about 3 years since 1982, so it was seen as a bit of a comeback. Went straight up the charts to number one. I think it might have displaced Madonna off the top spot. I'm just working from memory. This is different to the last two albums I've just shown you. This has a much heavier sound. It's a fifth album and comes out of her own studio. So she built her own studios in the previous couple of years leading to the release of this album. So what else can we say about it? So there's 5 tracks on here. 5 on side 1, Running Up That Hill, Hounds of Love, The Big Sky, Mother Stands for Comfort and Cloud Bursting. And side 2 is called The Ninth Wave. It's a sort of concept piece that has a number of tracks making it up. So it's a bit of a brave decision to do a sort of concept album in the middle of the 1980s. Yeah, but Kate's work has that quality that she can take chances like that, and it paid off. This is a bona fide 80s classic album. Running Up That Hill is of course the track that's just charted for the 3rd time. It got to, I think it went top 5 in 1985 on its original release. It came back out again in 2012 when it was used at the London 2012 Olympics, and it's just charted again on the back of the TV show Stranger Things, and it's just gone to number 1 in the download charts here in the UK, and I think it's doing well globally as well. So I'm really pleased about that, and as I said earlier, it prompted me to get this video done, which has been hanging around my head for some time. 4 of these songs from side 1 were selected as singles in the UK. 4. Don't think she'd really done that before. Most of them did reasonably well. The Big Sky didn't do quite so well, but that doesn't diminish the quality of the song. It's really good. Hounds of Love was another one, and Cloud Bursting is a huge favourite. That's the one with Donald Sutherland in the video. Kate was really into her videos at this time as well, and the Hounds of Love LP has 4 of them, and they are top videos. Kate was now a video director as well as a songwriter, singer and pianist. I don't think she's done work for others. She's very much all about pushing her own limits rather than sort of contracting out to work with other artists on video creation. The one track I want to mention in particular on here is the one track from side 1 which wasn't a single, and that's called Mother Stands for Comfort. It's a lovely track. It's very unusual. Kate's vocals are distorted on many of these songs, and there are a little bit on this, and I love it. It sounds like a track that was left over from the Dreaming Sessions, which is the previous album. You could put it on that LP and it wouldn't be out of place. That's what I'm saying. But yeah, it's an underrated track. I'd give it a spin. The Ninth Wave has several pieces making up the concept piece. The couple worth mentioning are Hello Earth is very good, and my favourite, and Dream of Sheep. Fantastic opening track to side 2. Recommend that one enormously. Anything else I've missed on talking about that? I don't think so. There's a bit of NASA dialogue in here during the Ninth Wave. There's a helicopter which has been pinched from one of the Pink Floyd LPs. There's also, I think, a little bit of Catholic church chanting or speech. Kate's background was Catholic. She went to a convent school, and on a couple or even 3 of her LPs, she just dips into that narrative slightly as a background vocal, which sort of invokes my own memories actually, but being to a Catholic school as well. But the Ninth Wave is about a character lost at sea, essentially drowning, or thinks they're going to drown, and it's all the thoughts going through their head as they do that. And it's just a classic piece. Okay, number 2 is 1982's The Dreaming, reached number 3. In fact, it's difficult to find a Kate Bush album that didn't make the top 5. I think Lionheart was number 6, if I recall. Yeah. Kate's Gone Mad album. Kate apparently had writer's block when she produced this, and she ended up using several different studios because she kept running out of time during the studio bookings. So it took a long time to get this album out. It had a difficult genesis. The previous year, in 1981, there was no album. Kate did a standalone single called Sat on Your Lap, which did quite well, and it was put onto this album for a parent album. And then the title track, The Dreaming, was really a few months before the LP release, so it was released in May '82, and that completely bombed. It wasn't commercial enough, to be honest. It's a very arty song about Aborigines in Australia. So when the LP came out later on in the year, there wasn't a single that came out with it to promote it, so it kind of escaped a little bit. I mean, the loyal fan base brought it, obviously, and that helped get it to number 3, but then it quickly disappeared down the charts. So EMI weren't really entirely pleased with this. They considered it a commercial failure. Having said that, this LP has gained a huge reputation in the intervening years. Fans now consider this LP to be Kate Bush's masterpiece, above Hounds of Love Just and anything else that she's done. And I wouldn't disagree with that. There are no big hit singles on here. There are no major songs that are known to the public in general. What you've got, I think it's 10 tracks, 10 songs that are very, very competent and are very, very good album tracks. When you put them all together, that's a great listen. And you have to play with the headphones. It's one of those LPs. You just really get into it. Kate's distorted vocals all over this LP, particularly Get Out of My House, and yeah, Get Out of My House is the main one with the distorted vocals, but there's a few others along the way. Pull Out the Pin, I think, is a bit like that as well. One track in particular I love on here is All the Love. I really like that one. Fantastic song. Yeah, so that's why it's my number 2. That's why it's high up. You could swap it around with Hounds of Love easily in terms of which one sits the best, but I really like it. Note about the cover, it has a kind of vampire feel, but it's not actually about vampires, and never looks like that. The cover is based on one of the songs on the LP called Houdini. So Houdini was a famous magician. They used to do escapology and stuff like that in the 19th century. Eventually he died when one of his stunts went wrong and he drowned. He used to jump into a lake chained up and escape within moments, and people couldn't work out how he was managed to get out of the chains and the locks. Well, his wife would kiss him goodbye before he jumped into the water, and she'd pass a little key into his mouth as she did so, and he would use the key to unlock the chains and get out. Obviously got it down to a fine art form, which we'd have to do, but apparently the one time he hit the water and swallowed the key and he drowned. So that's the story behind one of the songs that Kate wrote for the LP, and it forms the basis of the cover. Chap there, incidentally, that is Del Palmer, if anybody didn't know, Kate's partner at the time. Just a note I forgot to mention earlier about Kate's songwriting. In particular, when we were talking about Lionheart earlier, it's worth noting that for a lot of fans, particularly in the 80s and the 90s, we longed for another Kate Bush album. We longed for it to be a little bit like the 70s or the 80s, and understandably because of the quality of the work that she'd done. But as Kate's grown up and matured, she was never going to write another piece of music like what we got on The Kick Inside and Lionheart in particular, and probably not the early 80s stuff either. She can't make herself go back and become that teenager again. So Kate's very emotional. She writes from an emotional perspective. So she's writing about things, how she feels at the time. So as she gets older, I mean, what was the last album? 50 Words of Snow. She was in her mid-50s when that came out. So it reflects how Kate was then, not how Kate was when she made these original songs. So in hindsight, we were never going to get an LP like these others again, and that's fine because we're really happy with what we've got. But just wanted to say, some artists can carry on into their 70s and they can write songs the same as they did when they were in their 20s. 3-minute rock and roll numbers, not a problem. Jeff Lynne's a little bit like that, but not every artist can do that. They have to write how they feel. Kate's one of those. So that's why we'll never see anything like that ever again. Right, so obviously there's one album left, which is my number one, which you'd have guessed it already if you're familiar with all the LPs. It is 1980's Never Forever, Kate's first number one album, and the first by a British solo artist, female solo artist as well. It's a third album. It leaves behind some of the early teen woodwind based type songs, and Kate starts, it reflects some new writing from Kate from 1979 and 1980. It reflects Kate getting into a heavier sound. It's approaching the sound that she gets to on The Dreaming and on Hounds of Love, more of a drum based sound. The reason I've got it number one, apart from the fact there's some great music on here, which we'll get to in a moment, it's also the first time I ever heard Kate Bush. It was during art class at school. Somebody brought this LP in and played it, and I thought it was fantastic. So there on in, I started listening more to her music and picking up some of the records. This LP contains some classic tracks such as Babushka, two of the finest anti-war songs ever written. Everybody should hear Breathing at least once in their life, even if they're not a fan. It's a great track, very unusual, and what can I say about it? You just have to listen to it. It's difficult to actually describe vocally what it's like. Interesting story, when the EMI execs visited Kate in the studio during the production of this LP, they happened to walk in when she was singing the lines in, out from the Breathing track, and of course she sings them in such a way that sounds very sensual. It's not what she's implying. She's talking about nuclear war, but they didn't know that. They thought she was writing a song about sex, so I just thought that was funny. The other anti-war song on here is Army Dreamers, about a mother whose son goes off to join the army, but there's other great stuff on here as well. Delilis, I'm not sure I pronounced that right, but that's a song about summer, and it has some very interesting bee effects on it. Babushka, as I've said before, is a classic track, and that has Breaking Glass on it. So Kate's using a lot of sound effects on this LP for the first time, to great effect. The favourite track of mine on here, All We Ever Look For, is a beautiful track, I really love that. and The Infant Kiss, which is a fantastic track as well, so I recommend listening to those. I also love the cover. It's a great piece of art, and I mean, look at Kate, just absolutely mad, dressed as a bat there on the back. This is very proggy, and that's not something we used to talk about in the same sentence of Kate Bush. We might think of her as just a pop artist. Some people would just consider her a pop artist. We'd think of her as a sort of singer-songwriter, quite unique, bit of folky influence, bit of rocky influence, but not really prog. But lately, I think music journalism has tended to think more of Kate as more proggy now, and this was featured on the cover as a prog rock magazine a few months back. So yeah, I like the artwork. I love the music on here. As I said before, The Dreaming, The Hounds of Love are fantastic. You could put these top three all number one, in my opinion. But there we go. That's my thoughts on Kate's albums and which ones I like, and a little bit about her career. So I hope that was interesting for you. If you've got some other work but you haven't got all of it, I'd strongly recommend sorting out the gaps and having a listen to those. Whether we'll get another Kate Bush LP, I really don't know. Kate's in her 60s now. We might have seen the last one. If that's the case, so be it. I'm just really pleased with what we've got. And that's it. So, take care, and hopefully I'll do another video of something soon. I have got a lot of Kate Bush vinyl. I might do a video and just flash through that, just to let people know what I've got and what's out there and that you may not know about. Any comments appreciated in the comments field if you liked it. Any queries, feel free to put them down there. And